dirt tracks around the South. I have a very faint remembrance of being in. Alright, this is going to be my personal blog, my history, my life. I was Robert David Starling. I was born of goodly parents on January the 31st, 1946, in what was then called the City Hospital in Columbus, Georgia. It is now called the Columbus Regional Medical Center, or something to that effect. I believe I was born at 4:35 in the morning. I'm told that I was about 2 weeks late being born, and when I'm late to appointments now, I say, well, I was born 2 weeks late, and I've been trying to catch up ever since. Something about my parents, Horace Austin Starling and Ruby Marie Owens, were married about 2 years prior to my birth in late June 24th, 1944, in the midst of World War II. My dad was not involved in the war. He was 18 when he got married. My mother was 17. My father had experienced, I believe it was called osteomyelitis in his leg and hip when he was a child, which resulted in, it was a bone disease, which resulted in his having his hip sort of fused solid, so he always walked with a limp. He had a nickname of Hoppy because of that. My mom and dad were married by Arthur Gilbert, who was the branch president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Columbus branch at that time. And the details of their marriage and courtship, etc., should be in his history. I'll check it and see, and any details that have been passed on to me by oral history from my mom and dad that's not there, I'll try to add later, perhaps come back and edit this particular record at this point. My earliest memories would involve, there was one I'm not quite sure when it was, but I couldn't have been more than about 2 years old because it was my grandfather, Jackson David Canaan Owens, had the hobby of racing 1/3 scale midget racers. These were patterned after the Indianapolis style racers of the time, but they were 1/3 scale, and he would race on various dirt tracks around the South. I have a very faint remembrance of being in the family car with my grandmother, Marie Chambliss Owens Rogers, pushing my grandfather's race car on the track to get it started, pushing it with the car. Those little racers did not have starters or batteries, and so you had to push them to get them started. And I just remember just kind of sitting in the front seat of the car alongside my grandmother as we were pushing my granddad's car to get it started. I really have no real memories of my grandfather. Anything that I know about him, it's what people have told me. That is my grandfather Owens, Jack Owens. And again, I will have to check the other histories to see what family anecdotes and histories are contained in that. If not, I'll add them into this record. My other grandfather, Jack Starling, I never really thought about it, but both of my grandfathers were named Jack. Interesting. Who's Alfred Jack Starling, although in some records it's known as Alfred Jasper Starling, and I don't know where the discrepancy comes from. We'll have to look into that actually. My memories of Pop, as we call him, Jack Starling. I always knew him as just Pop. And my grandmother, Clara Norris Starling, both of whom were born and raised in South Alabama near Abbeville, Alabama. And around the age of 16, 17, I guess it was, both of them migrated to Columbus, Georgia to work in the cotton mills. I'd like to go back and review how I believe they met after they came to Columbus. I'll have to double check on that. But both of them worked in the cotton mills in Columbus. That's where they came here. The area down in southern Alabama they came from, jokingly referred to in later years as LA or Lower Alabama. It was known in earlier years as down home. If you told people in Columbus you came from down home, they knew it was from down in South Alabama around Dothan in that area. My memories of Pop have to do with mostly being out in his workshop in the backyard with him. They lived in a house down Earline Avenue for many, many years. That's where my father, Austin Starling, was born. I remember being in the backyard of the house at Earline Avenue, and where Mom and Pop had a little, like a water trough there that they had always filled with water, and they had minnows in it because they loved to go fishing. That was their thing. That was their pastime. They would fish with these long cane poles, sit on the bank of the river, and put worms and minnows, crickets or whatever as bait, and catch fish. That was their pastime. There's a great picture of them sitting fishing, one of which, there may be more than one. One of them includes Gary sitting with them, my brother. But they loved to fish, and I remember being in their house down Earline Avenue, which was heated by, each room had a little gas heater with ceramic elements in it. That the flame would heat up the ceramic elements and it would heat the room. I believe those rooms were originally constructed with fireplaces to build fires. But as modern times came along, they would put one of these gas heaters in the place where the fireplace was, so that it was like a gas fireplace sort of thing. My grandmother, I remember her cooking at a wood stove that they would bring firewood in and actually build a fire in the stove. Of course, later she got a gas stove. I remember family gatherings in that house. There are photos of that house. And I remember Christmas time, my Uncle Jack, my father's older brother, at one point had a movie camera, an 8mm movie camera with a light bar on it, a couple of really bright lights, and we have a DVD of all of Uncle Jack's movies, which includes some of those shot in the house, I believe. The house was, as I remember, originally may have been built as a duplex because it had 2 front doors. But there was only one back door that I remember. At one point, my grandmother was a beautician, and she cut hair and styled hair, gave ladies permanents. And I remember in those early days, before they began using chemicals to put permanent waves in ladies' hair, they had electric curlers, and they would have a big dome-shaped device that put the ladies sat under, and each of the curlers had an electric wire running to a master circuit or whatever, and they would roll up their hair and then put these electric clamps around them, which would heat up and thus apply heat to the rolled hair and curled hair. And, she had 1 or 2 of these, I call them electric octopus machines, on her back porch, or in the back room, where she would have people come and she'd give them permanents to work on their hair. In later years, as they began to use chemicals, she would also have these big boxes full of rollers and curlers, which I would play with as a kid. And the place always smelled of the chemical permanent wave chemicals and the neutralizers for those. And I remember her working on ladies' hair. In later years, she had her own barbershop on 54th Street, called, not barbershop, but class, I don't know what you call it, beauty shop, I guess. And after we moved up to 55th Street when I was about 4 and a half, 5 years old, we, her house was later, the Early Avenue house was actually moved up to Thomaston Avenue next to the house that they had built. And I don't remember the house movers moving it. I remember when it was moved. And her beauty shop was not far away on 54th Street. And I have a photo of that. It's kind of fuzzy, but I do have a photo of it. I have a newer photo, because the building is still there, her beauty shop. It has a different name on it now, of course. But my grandmother, Starling, was always very sweet, very loving. She made blackberry and peach fried pies, blackberry cobbler. And she made fried pies with peaches that were very good. Her chicken dressing dinners were legendary. She made a lemonade that was kind of weak, but it was very good. And I always remember her lemonade. She made fried cornbread, which was patties of cornbread, about like a pancake, only a little smaller, a little thicker, fried cornbread. And she made Momo's hamburgers. Momo's hamburgers were legendary, and I have a video of her actually making her hamburgers, showing how she did it. She would take hamburger meat and put in a bowl of hamburger meat, put in a couple of eggs, and she'd take a couple of pieces of bread and wet them with water, and some onions chopped up, and then she would knead it all together. So it was a mixture of hamburger meat and eggs and bread and onions. And of course, she'd put salt and pepper in there. And she would knead it all together. And then of that mixture, she would make her hamburger patties. And they'd be made with the hamburgers. They had mustard and ketchup and maybe some mayonnaise, lettuce, tomatoes, onions. And boy, Momo's hamburgers, we called her Momo. Her hamburgers were legendary. We loved to go to Momo's house for Momo's hamburgers, and lemonade, and such. Momo loved to cook for her family, and it's almost like she would bribe us to come to her house. She says, "Come on over, I'll cook you dinner." And I guess that's how she knew she could get frequent visits from family to come and see her. In later years, sometimes I felt like we didn't go see her enough. She